It wasn't in the script for the trigger to be pulled.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them. Never.
Well, that was an interview. Now it's been determined that Baldwin did pull the trigger. Look, as a guy that's carried a firearm for over 20 years, there's so much wrong with this story. But then again, it's a movie set. It's not me walking from my vehicle to a studio and into the house at home. Now that Alec Baldwin and the armor from Rust, Reed, I think, they're going to be charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter in the shooting death of the cinematographer Hutchinson's. Now, what happens to them in the movie itself, I don't know. How's this likely to play out? Do notable actors have an advantage with juries? Well, I guess it depends on the jury. What's the burden of proof in a case like this? Lynn McGraw, owner of McGraw Law Group and trial attorney, is with me. Thank you, Counselor, for being with me. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
All right. I'm sure you've followed this Alec Baldwin thing. What's he looking at? I mean, in the worst case scenario, what is it, 5 years?
Yeah, worst case scenario is 5 years incarceration on one of the involuntary manslaughter cases. The lesser included has a mandatory sentence of at least a year, and then the judge has some discretion over and above that.
Yeah, I think it's obvious even to people that don't know the law that there wasn't intent here. Somebody said, "Well, Rick, you're an attorney. Well, why don't they go for murder?" Well, first of all, I'm not a trial attorney. I was a corporate oil and gas contract attorney. But I will say this: my mentor was a courtroom, in my mind, magician, Jerry Spence. And I learned a lot from this guy, stuff that I never did in practical use. But, I don't think there was any intent, and I don't even think they tried to go there. It looked to me that everything, I think reckless sums a lot of this up, don't you?
Yes. The thing is, and I'll tell you, Jerry Spence is also a hero of mine. I've been through his trial lawyers college back in 2002.
Oh, great.
So good man, wonderful man. But to prevail in this case, the prosecutor has to show criminal negligence. In every state, they define it just a little bit differently. But in New Mexico, where this happened, you have to show actual or imputed foreseeability of danger to the victim and a substantial and unjustified risk. Okay, it's a little different than we have here in Texas. Texas is a little higher standard than
right.
that, and that's one of the reasons that I believe the prosecutors are bringing this case is because substantial and unjustifiable risk is something that they believe they can show by pointing a weapon at another human being and pulling the trigger.
Yeah, that I didn't pull the trigger statement sort of came back to bite Baldwin. I think prosecutors did a pretty good job of lining that out. I'm just trying to figure out why they had any live rounds on the set to begin with.
They shouldn't have, and that was part of the negligence, the civil case that was brought. There shouldn't have been live rounds there at all. The interesting thing about the investigation that was done indicates that there were 2 prior instances of discharges of firearms on that set before this occurred, and that just floored me when I found that fact out. Yeah,
that submarined them pretty good. I'm wondering, and you deal with this all the time. I know Baldwin did a settlement in the civil case. Do you think after he wrote that check, he thought, okay, all this is behind me and the rest of this will go away?
Potentially. But I think one of the reasons that he was actually given those interviews was the potential of an indictment coming or an information. He was charged heavily by information. But the reason that I think that he may be doing that, most criminal defense lawyers are going to tell their clients, never, never, never talk.
Right.
Don't give them more. ammunition. But when you're dealing with somebody that's famous, when you're dealing with somebody that people already, quote unquote, know, people tend to get more information about that through the filter of them already knowing that person or knowing about them. And sometimes when people are famous, it's very difficult for prosecutors to gain convictions because people think that they know the person.
Exactly.
And they don't think that they're a bad person.
They have a preconceived notion of who the person is and what they're about. And I'm with you on all those interviews he did. As I watched those, and of course you got to kind of read between the lines, play devil's advocate, if you will. It seemed like he was perhaps setting a foundation should he need to go back and retrieve some of that. It didn't hit me right. Again, as a person that's carried for 2 decades, I have to find some fault with Baldwin. If a weapon is in your hand, I don't care if it's a movie, if it's real life, it doesn't matter. There's some responsibility goes with that, even if you've got somebody that's being paid to direct you through that. And I'm sure that's what they found as well.
Well, the interesting thing to me is that the difference here is, is this criminal negligence or simply civil negligence?
Right.
I think that everybody understands there's some degree of culpability for pointing a gun at somebody and not knowing if it was loaded and pulling a trigger. The other interesting thing here is this is in New Mexico, so the people that are going to be jurors in this case are going to be very similar to some of the people that we have here in Texas, right? Because there are a lot of gun owners, and almost anybody that's a gun owner, whether they carry it or not, the very first rule that everybody learns is check and make sure that if it's loaded or not.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's always the person's responsibility that has the gun to make sure it's loaded or not loaded. And that is liable to play in here a little differently than it might, say, in California or some other state. I've seen like Mickey O'Rourke's interview about this, his social media post, and he said that actors don't know anything about guns and this sort of thing. And it just left me scratching my head, saying, well, that might be so in California, but if you're going to be charged criminally in New Mexico, if you're going to be in New Mexico filming, you better have some basic gun safety, because I promise you those folks know about gun safety. Absolutely.
Bottom line, last question. And I always hesitate to ask attorneys this question because you get paid to deal with facts, not speculation. But how do you think this thing's going to play out?
I think it's going to be a very interesting case to watch, solely because of his notoriety. I think that the armorer is really going to probably get convicted of one, at least of the lesser included. I don't know about Mr. Baldwin simply because of his fame, right. And I think that is going to play a role. It's played a role in a lot of famous criminal cases in our past, and I just don't know how that's going to play. But I think if it was just based on the facts, he's going to have his lawyer's going to have a very difficult hill to climb.
No, I think you're right. I don't see him doing lengthy jail time, but I don't see him avoiding it in totality. I think the judge's discretion. A lot of times, as you well know, they almost have to go overboard, so the appearance is not that they were moved as a juror might be moved by somebody's fame or notoriety.
Well, the interesting thing about New Mexico law, where this happened, the judge does not have discretion if there's a finding of a firearm use for the involuntary manslaughter, even under the lesser included charge.
Right.
He has to give them at least a year.
That's true. Yeah.
And
then his discretion starts after that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Listen, I've enjoyed this. Lynn McGraw, I don't think we've ever talked before, owner of McGraw Law Group and trial attorney. Hopefully we can talk again.
Oh, I'd love to.
All right. Appreciate your time.